Hello, my name is Naresh Khanna, editor of Indian Printer and Publisher and Packaging South Asia. And I'm here today with Kiran Priyagi, the well-known practitioner of technology improvements for printing and packaging. Kiran is well versed in the technology from a scientific and technical point of view, and is also known as a practitioner, somebody who practically helps printers to improve their process, basically their quality process and their efficiency process, if he is able to standardize the quality to some extent or to optimize the process to some extent. I hope I'm not getting that wrong. So basically what I want to ask Kiran today are two questions, because I have known him for a while and I know that he is a little bit skeptical about people claiming that they have standardized or they have some kind of a certification, whether it's an ISO certification or a PSO certification or a G7 certification. Kiran tends to look at these with a little bit of, let's say, a grain of salt. And his insights have to do with what is really needed, I think, as basic steps perhaps, before we go to that level. So first I'll ask Kiran to address himself to the issues of optimization, efficiency, and standardization of printing, particularly with reference to where we are as Indian printers and packaging converters.
Thank you, Naresh. I'm happy to join you in your studio, and I'm happy that you have taken up this subject of standards. Now, let me put it this way. Having worked in the industry with suppliers and as a consultant for standardization and color management and so on. Now, many times the term standard is actually misunderstood, and I will say why it has been misunderstood. Many times people say, okay, we have standardized the whole thing, but many times you find many of the printers, when the job goes on the machine operator somehow will switch the ink keys up and down and will get the results. And the owner or the senior manager will think, oh, his profile has worked perfectly well, without even measuring the density of the color strip, or without even following the right densities or the right LAB. Now, let me tell you, now when you talk about the standards, the standardization is process is basically to follow the discipline. Doesn't matter what discipline you follow, but there has to be certain discipline, certain way of doing the thing, certain parameters to check in each department. And when you do that, then we say the company has some standards. Now, so in case of standard, now there are certain things about the standard. For example, now people today talk about the G7, they talk about ISO and so on. Now there are many hidden things in that. In the sense, if you talk about the ISO 12647, yeah, there what happens, there are certain things which are specified in that standard. That is the type of paper, what type of ink should use. Now, without having regard to those kind of details, if you say that we are following ISO 12647, I think it doesn't make sense. Also, if you talk about the G7 or if you talk about the ideal lens, basically you are measuring the printed patches. And you are saying, okay, I have printed to the right density with the right dot gain. But it has to go beyond that. What is the relationship of that color strip to the job? Relationship to the picture. Customer is not paying for the color strip, customer is paying for the job. And that's where I think this relationship has to be understood very firmly, and that's where the color management comes, and it plays a great role. Unfortunately, the term color management is not really understood very well by most of the printers. Color management does not work if you don't have a process standardization. In each printing process, there are hundreds of variables. You take any process, even the chemicals which we use in offset machine, the blanket pressure, the zero setting of the ink duct. When it comes to gravure, your engraving technology, what kind of cells you have engraved when it comes to flexo, what kind of analogs roll you have, are you using the right analogs for the right job, for the right substrate, are you putting the right pressure? I mean, there are so many variables. So if that if that is not taken care of, forget about the color management, because it's not going to work. Most of the places, when they talk about the color management, they just print one of, somebody will set the machine very nicely, use the new blanket and so on. But that's not your regular standard. You have to use the consumables which you are going to use in production regularly. And the quality of the incoming consumables should be recorded before you start the color management. The machine maintenance has to be done properly. And then you have the proper color, your test chart printing. And test chart should be printed under production conditions and take the average of the few copies, make the profile, and then you again recheck with the production jobs. And unless that is done, many times they call somebody, unfortunately many times what happens, even with the big companies, somebody coming from the printing engineering college, new fellow, oh, put him on color management. The person who implement the color management should be the most experienced fellow, not somebody who is novice. Because there are so many aspects. There is lighting that comes in, there is how you view it, from what distance you view it, and how your press is set up. All this, so it should be the most experienced fellow who knows how to standardize the printing process. And standardization of the printing process is also, it has to be done over a period. And every printing company should have some quality control lab internally. I'm not talking about the quality control lab in an expensive way like the suppliers or ink manufacturers or the paper manufacturer, but there has to be some techniques of checking the consumable, checking the raw material in a simple way, whatever the company can afford. Bigger printer will have a bigger lab, small printer will have a smaller lab, but those checks must be done. Otherwise you get surprises when you put the new chemical, new plate on the machine, and then you're wasting your production time, you're wasting your everything.
Or even when you order a new batch of ink from the same supplier, if you have not tested it against the master sample, there is no guarantee that that ink has the correct shade, hue, saturation, or that it will behave similarly on the press.
Absolutely. And these consumables, fountain solution, you take even the chemicals you use it to clean the machine, whether it's cleaning it properly, is it changing your roller condition, is it making roller hard, all these are very important aspects. But unfortunately, the standardization has a very superficial meaning. The color management is taken as somebody who will make profile in a day and give a profile. So this has to be taken as it has to be taken as a company-wide responsibility, color management. And it should also include the suppliers' checks, and also it should include when you get the incoming file from your customers. I mean, what kind of, how they are making their design or artwork, what profile they are applying, if at all they are applying profile. Many times what happens, it just comes and everybody says, oh, we are using swap profile. Okay, Photoshop is American, so they will only put swap in their Photoshop book. So everybody thinks swap is a standard. So all this has to be clearly understood. So there has to be internal team, internal training program, internal standardization, and a good teamwork if someone wants to do a proper standardization, not just a superficial. Many times today what is happening, just because the supplier is insisting from America, you must have G7 or you must have this, you do it, but then what next? Only your patches are matching. What about the job? I know quite a few printers, they say we are certified, but the job is not matching. I mean, that's but I'm sorry to say that, but this is what is happening in the industry.
No, quite right. Okay. So basically, as a first explanation or critique or understanding of color standardization, what Kiran Priyagi has said is, first of all, standardization means in normal production conditions, not as a special condition just for a test of some test patches. Secondly, your job in work is not to print patches. Your work is to produce usable print for your customer. So you have to correlate what is the issue. And the third thing, if I get it, to put it very briefly, what Kiran has said is that the entire process needs to be cleaned up. The entire process, right from making plates, they have to be calibrated. The chemistry of the processor has to be calibrated. The laser has to be checked every morning. So these are all established processes. And actually, there are no shortcuts if you want to go this route. If you want to go to the route of optimization, standardization, and efficiency, you have to follow all the steps. You have to learn all the parameters, and all this is available. The data is available. It's doable whether you are big or small, but it requires, as Kiran said in the beginning, basic discipline.
Can I just add one more thing?
Yes, please.
Most of the time you talk to these printers and they say, oh, it's a supplier job. What they don't understand, you are a printer, you are employing printing technologies, if at all you are employing them. Most of the suppliers today, they have software engineers and they have or some management graduates, very few have real good printing technologies. So it's a printer's own job to do all this and not depend on the supplier that he will come and do it.
Okay, that's very interesting, because from what I'm learning now from Kiran is that after all now, the machines are available. Anybody who has the money can buy a very good multicolor press. Everyone can buy a CTP. So most of the equipment and software is supplied, which one presumes will work automatically. Then what is the value that a printing business adds? And this is what Kiran is saying, that it is your job to inject the technology and understanding of printing. That is the value that you are going to add. That is where you are going to get an edge over the other printer. That is where you are going to have less wastage, perhaps. And that is where you are going to be able to deliver a quality and make a brand for yourself as a printer. That means without understanding the technology, without trying to implement it in a disciplined way, there is really no point, except that you are simply a purchaser of a machine and you are not really a printer.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. Naresh, you are absolutely right. And I think you see my point, what I'm saying.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's hope that other people see it also. Thank you.